A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms was pretty much a perfect adaptation. So perfect, in fact, that the Breaking Bad community is review bombing the show, which I feel is a very high endorsement that only a few shows have the honor of receiving. For this video, this will operate as my season review, and I'll dive into specific aspects that make A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms so great. For the first one, I think we have to fundamentally start with why the show is so compelling, down to a foundational level, where A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms fills in exactly what people have been wanting or craving from this franchise, offering three original aspects that aren't featured in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Those are the main protagonist being of low birth, this is a small-scale story, and this is also a different genre. Starting with the main protagonist point, we've only seen stories told through the perspectives of great lords. We've never followed someone coming from humbling beginnings. This intrinsically makes Dunk a captivating figure to follow because every step of his journey is plagued with immense conflict. Having to worry about the prospects of livelihood, food, and money was never really a factor for these other shows. This infuses stakes for Dunk from the get-go, where failure at any turn will be detrimental for him. This acts to make you, the viewer, deeply invested in Dunk. He's a walking underdog from the very first scene, and not only are there high stakes, but his goals and aspirations are desirable. You want him to succeed and to become the successful knight because he's a virtuous person. This in comparison to a lot of other characters, say in like House of the Dragon, Dunk blows them out of the water because you relate much more to Dunk. For the next aspect of the story that makes it unique is the scale at which it's told. We've been exploring big wars and dozens of morally flawed characters, and in doing so, you start losing sight of the perspective of the common folk, the people who ultimately suffer under the hands of these lords. Pivoting to a smaller scale, this reinvigorates the sensation of this world feeling real. We're going more in depth, exploring the inner machinations of hedge knights, tourneys, and how this all interacts with Westeros' general population. And sometimes, despite House of the Dragon's big scale, it can oftentimes feel claustrophobic in the sense that so much of the story is told through squabbling small councils. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a proper adventure. Each season will be going to new locations, and this more in-depth variety, I think, better shows off what Westeros as a whole offers. This is one of the most detailed and dense fantasy worlds out there, and it's very refreshing being unshackled from being stuck in a few main locations. Then lastly, for why the story is a breath of fresh air, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms features a new genre. We obviously have never seen a comedic show before in this world, which in of itself is cool to see. Some of the more humorful segments of Game of Thrones were very compelling, so putting a major focus on that type of vibe is going to work out great, especially in comparison to the other stories being offered that are generally darker to say the least. This creates an entire new vibe and sensation from consuming a story in the Game of Thrones universe, making it more multifaceted in what it has to offer as a whole. And even despite at first starting as a more lighthearted show, I love the sudden pivot and surprise when the genre evolves into something more dramatic and action-packed, making it feel like the story is dynamic. Moving on from the nature of the story, I want to go into the show's biggest strength, and that's the infectious character bond between Dunk and Egg. Game of Thrones was known for having some iconic duos, like Bronn and Tyrion, Tyrion and Varys, and Arya and the Hound. However, I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms outclasses them with Dunk and Egg. There's a lot of depth between them, they're unrelentingly endearing and lovable, and every interaction they have is overflowing with humor.
What did you do when people said you were stupid, sir?
What business is that of yours? My problems are my own.
But to showcase the best aspect of their relationship, it's the pure juxtaposition between their characters. Dunk is a lunk of low birth, while Egg is a princeling with a high amount of intelligence. They're polar opposites in constitution, and this creates a sense of delicious irony, where this dichotomy betrays the inherent stereotypes of this relationship archetype. The major contrasts between them are intelligence, obedience, and social status, and all of these challenge the squire and knight power dynamic. For intelligence, Egg will chime in and correct Dunk on anything that comes out of his mouth. Every time Egg challenges Dunk, forcing him to question himself in a bemusing manner, it's always fun. On top of this also operating as a clever form of exposition. Given Egg's status, he knows a wealth of knowledge that he can communicate to not just Dunk, but us the audience. He's calling out who lords are or is explaining certain mechanics to us. So it's interesting how this not only serves a function of humor, but additionally gives more depth to the relationship and can serve the narrative in supplying natural exposition. Then on the subject of obedience, this is the highlight for this relationship. Like, one of the most iconic lines from the novella series is,
Do you want a clout in the ear?
in response to any time Dunk receives any sass or opposition. And the lovely aspect that makes Dunk so charming in this regard is he never intends to do this. He always says it in a joking manner as if he's aware of the inherent compromised power dynamic. And the fact that Egg backs off and still respects Dunk most of the time and doesn't act like a spoiled brat, in turn makes him lovable as well. Then lastly, there's the aspect of place of birth or status. This creates the biggest contrast between these two characters because they lived in completely opposite livelihoods, leading Egg to kind of be surprised by certain customs, or be put off by disgusting things that are normal to the common folk, or what they even treat as luxuries. Egg isn't used to eating hard salt beef.
Oh, I'm Egg. I can't eat hard salt beef. I just eat lovely food and grapes and all the...
And I love the detail of Egg being disgusted by a fly being in his cider. It's not something the common folk would ever care about, but for a lord, they expect perfection or at least higher standards. Just a cool detail that alludes to Egg being a Targaryen. So this allows Dunk to kind of mock Egg in a fun way. We haven't seen a lot of this yet, and this will inevitably lead to more fun humor of Dunk badgering Egg about being partially spoiled, and wanting to sleep on beds as an example, and not on the ground like a normal person. Then this is really just looking at their relationship from the angle of juxtaposition because there's so much more. Like, another thing I love is the magnetic pull Egg has towards Dunk. It's almost like he can sniff out his high sense of honor like a bloodhound. You could argue maybe it's Egg dreaming, but Ira Parker never alludes to that, and Darren is the only one who foresees Dunk in a prophetic way. And a deeper point of irony here is Dunk isn't actually a knight, a major change from the book, but I find it interesting how despite not being a knight, Egg is still drawn in by Dunk's gravitational pull of heroism. Egg's refusal to leave may be derived from his high status and unwillingness to take no as an answer, but it still creates this endearing connection between them. All the while, Dunk doesn't have the cruelty to drive him away and can all but accept Egg as Arlen did for him. Dunk sees himself in Egg in a way. He deeply resonates with him on a personal level that I feel isn't often explored in the more superficial relationships that knights and squires have. It's touching, sentimental, and given how warm their duo is within this general archetype, it's thus very unique.
Shut up.
Unlocking a great story that feels fresh, and this is also surrounded by the dark world of Game of Thrones. The events and path the story takes challenges their relationship, and seeing them come through in the end, ever standing and even stronger than before, makes them an outstanding duo. One of my favorite attributes of Game of Thrones was George bringing a lot of complexity to knighthood, challenging the general theme of honor. Anything relating to Jaime Lannister surrounding this was always entrancing, and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms puts its primary thematic focus on what it means to be a knight. George R. R. Martin expertly blends the dark nature of the human condition and mixes that ingredient with the pureness of knighthood, creating multiple intriguing moral quandaries that act to deconstruct the perception of knights, treating the subject with more realism and practicality. Because humans are driven by their innate selfish desire, this fundamentally clashes with the idealism of high-honor knights. Seeing this expressed in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is really interesting, from knights openly and brazenly whoring, Steffan Fossilway betraying Dunk for a lordship, and no one coming to Dunk's aid in a time of need despite him being in the right. This is a flawed world where actual honorable knights are a rarity, even though everyone makes the vows to protect the innocent. That's why I love the change that Ira Parker makes, where they all but confirm that Dunk isn't a knight, pretty much making an ironic statement that the most knightly person here is someone who isn't one on a technicality. This reinforces the idea that knighthood is a sham. It's all but a fancy title given to people as a reward for doing anything, or you can flat out blackmail a knight to make you one. Like, even though I love Raymond Fossaway and he's very adorable, they literally only made him a knight out of necessity and desperation. Instead, the true test of someone's character isn't a title, but looking inwards and analyzing their character and actions. Staying true to yourself and remaining virtuous even under great pressure and challenge is what makes you a hero. Dunk's unrelenting stubbornness to not back down is truly what makes him such a beloved character. One of the things that took me by surprise for the Hedge Knight is how George plays with expectations. This is a story that's sold to you as a Hedge Knight entering a tourney looking to make a living. The baseline expectation there, due to established story tropes, is this can either go two ways. Dunk wins or loses the tourney, and more often than not, he'll probably win it. However, George takes the story in a completely unexpected direction, something that doesn't even relate to jousting, where Dunk attacks a prince and thereby has to fight a trial of the seven to prove his innocence. Pretty insane pivot, and this sudden turn makes me respect George immensely. It's such a sudden rug pull, and yet it sends the story in a way more interesting direction, imbuing the narrative with deeper themes of corruption, politics, and scheming, like with Baylor trying to help Dunk by giving him the idea of demanding a trial by combat. These aspects enrich the story, bringing it a bit in line with what you'd come to expect in the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, where these inner machinations clash together and test someone of high character in a climactic and brutal way. This also leads to the stakes astronomically skyrocketing to a point where you feel Dunk's anxiety for him. The entirety of episode 4 is really interesting in the regard of how they play up the sense of anxiety, because when you compare it to prior episodes, the pacing is much different. Episodes 1 through 3 were more low-key. Ira Parker took his time and it was a very relaxing experience. Episode 4 presses the acceleration and thereby increases the pressure surrounding Dunk. Scenes feel like they fly by, he's got great urgency now as he's hastily moving around asking for support, and he's quickly ushered into the trial ill-equipped and not mentally prepared. This of course directly goes into the next point for the stellar climax. I just posted an entire analysis meticulously going over why it's the best fight scene in Game of Thrones as a whole, and instead of cringily saying just go watch that video for this segment, I'll summarize the main points I made there, and if you want a follow-up video or haven't finished eating your meal yet, then that video is on the table. The first great characteristic of this fight is its perspective. Staying within Dunk's POV makes this a harrowing and tense experience. Changing from his point of view would decrease the scene's efficacy because this is all about Dunk's excruciating journey. This showcases my favorite ingredient of action, and that's how much a character struggles, accentuating the challenge they endure. This reinforces how vulnerable they are, and the amount of pain they sustain is heart-wrenching, making you wince at every blow Dunk receives. Also, to sell this more effectively, Ira Parker expands on the source material where Dunk and Arianne have an actual sustained duel that goes on for a decent amount of time, thus making the scene way more exciting and even more satisfying since Dunk bests Arianne in combat. While addressing the action, there's also a deep layer of authenticity, primarily in how armor functions within this fight. It's actually stopping blades from piercing deep into the tissue, it's deflecting blunted weapons causing characters to get battered around, and at some points Dunk even uses his armor as a shield in of itself to parry blows. This fundamentally alters the choreography into something more unique that isn't just a sword duel, and the aspect of armor and weak points plays a crucial part throughout. Then, looking at this from a production standpoint, I love how this scene is shot. Even while retaining this adrenaline-fueled POV, we still get longer take wide shots of Dunk and Arianne fighting. They're doing all of this for real, and Owen Harris, the director, lets the scene breathe because you don't need to cheat anything. These are literally people wrestling in the mud, so holding on these moments and letting us watch in horror is more effective than quickly cutting around creating a more artificial sense of chaos. We instead get tangible chaos. Lastly, from the perspective of writing, the scene has two exciting twists or subversions. The first one is Dunk seemingly rising from the dead, and this is a change Ira Parker made from the novella and is a massive uplifting moment. And there's even a secret ambiguous element surrounding it. Then, of course, the end of the episode with Baylor's death is the main highlight. An ultimate tragedy, and someone who's perfect to be king dies protecting someone who was wronged by his own family. It's built up perfectly, there's a subtle layer of dread, the reveal was utterly shocking, and the way this death impacts everyone and sends seismic fissures throughout the narrative is brilliant writing. George absolutely cooked with Baylor's death and is one of my favorite moments from anything associated with Game of Thrones. The Trial of the Seven as a whole is a perfect, exhilarating climax, and is also just downright cool getting to see this type of trial unfold. I'd love to keep gushing about it, but if you want to hear more, then there is my longer and more in-depth analysis on this sequence. For the next point, I want to highlight how excellent of an adaptation A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is, especially since this topic has been injected with wildfire due to the chaotic controversy that has been going on behind the scenes, with the Clegane Bowl-like event but with George and Ryan Condal having a major falling out. Ira Parker, on the other hand, makes a very faithful adaptation while making numerous changes that better the source material. This has always been a very nuanced topic in the sense that when a creator makes a bad change, people normally default to, oh, they should have been more faithful, or changing anything from the source material betrays the vision of the original creator and most changes are heresy. But sometimes making changes is a necessity, or there are clear opportunities to make the original work better by fleshing things out. This is particularly what Ira Parker does for The Hedge Knight. That novella was about 100 pages, and there were a lot of opportunities to expand on it. Even though episodes were seemingly short in the 30-minute range, the overall runtime is still much longer than the book. Like the epilogue, as an example, is only 5 pages. There's a lot of original scenes that act to flesh out plot beats, or some characters get featured significantly more. Like the two most notable characters receiving this treatment were Lionel Baratheon and Raymond Fossaway, where they became tangible side characters in the show. Lionel especially doesn't even know Dunk in the novella. He basically just shows up because he thinks it'll be sick to fight in a Trial of the Seven, and it hasn't been done in a long time. Lionel Baratheon gets a full-blown overhaul, and he comes out being one of the biggest highlights in the show, which is a massive testament to Ira Parker taking advantage of this character's likability and drastically increasing his screen time and involvement. Despite Ira Parker ironically not including what made him so iconic in the book, where he's the laughing storm, where his booming laughter intimidates his opponents on the battlefield. Instead, he focuses more on character building simply because he has more time to do so, unlocking this chaotic demon child of a character that you love to death. I'm mainly focusing on one example right now, but you then apply this to everything else. Every character receives more development, which in turn increases the quality and depth of the narrative. Past this, Ira Parker also makes some big changes, and generally this can be very troubling, but in this case, they're all pretty interesting. Examples being it's heavily insinuated and pretty much confirmed that Dunk isn't a knight, Egg defies his father, and Egg even comes close to killing his own brother. The last change particularly is a very dark, extremely well written and acted moment that feels so reserved, and I'll definitely dive into this topic deeper with a more in-depth video on adaptation for The Hedge Knight. I'd love to go into all of that now, but like with my Ellie video where I deconstructed her character for The Last of Us Season 2, there's just too much I want to cover. Notably, the biggest part of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms I haven't talked about much is the humor. And initially in my episode 1 review, I was a bit hesitant. The Dunk diarrhea gag and using flashbacks as quick slapstick moments was setting a slightly worrying precedent of the tone being too absurd. However, after episode 1, I don't think it ever gets as outlandish as that again, and a lot of the humor naturally stems from Dunk and Egg's relationship. It's a very grounded source, so it's not being forced in weird ways. I've already analyzed how and why their duo is infectious and funny, but to add to this, other characters add a lot of humor as well. A prime example being Lionel Baratheon being hilarious in every scene, basically justifying his Laughing Storm title besides its actual origin in the novella. One of my favorite moments from him was the Maester gag.
An itchy arsehole is beyond your abilities, my friend. Be gone, witch. Fuck off with you.
He's delightful throughout, and his unbridled charisma clashing into Dunk's shyest nature is a lot of fun. And for Dunk, obviously him being a lunk is always hysterical. So many moments where he's not reading the room correctly and blunders into such awkward conversations.
His sons went astray on the way here, and he fears for them.
I trust they will not be found dead.
Then to add some variety of humor, Makar adds a bit of a darker, more brooding source of comedy. His reaction to anything Aryan says is always gold. In general, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has a very colorful cast. Each character offers a handsome wealth of unique comedy. Then for the tone, the pace and music creates this warm and cozy vibe. Characters get to relax, make simple meals, and these smaller moments are cherished because they not only highlight the small upbeat moments of living life amongst the common folk, but it also acts as nice character development. Something as simple as Dunk and Egg pondering over their fate at their camp is sweet and inspiring. It gives the story more breathing room, and if you were watching the show weekly, the first few episodes may feel a bit slow, but I'm sure watching it all together is a much more satisfying experience. And once episode 4 hits, the tone shifts into something darker and more serious. That kind of subversion break really catches you off guard, given what's established in the first half of the season, and thus makes that second half that much more surprising. Overall, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms was very egg-tastic, catching everyone who is unfamiliar with the source material off guard, and showcases that Westeros very much can still offer high-quality stories. It's a rich and fascinating world with so many incredible characters, and just following these two alone will lead to multiple great seasons of television. I know Ira Parker has a pretty big vision for the show, wanting to continue it for a long time, so hopefully once they run out of novellas, they'll be able to sustain the quality set by this season, and if anything, I have faith in him since every change he made was really good. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments what you think about the Hedge Knight. My Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description, and have a great day. Thanks to my consistently wonderful top patron, Logan Farmer.